Hello everyone, welcome to the Icehouse podcast. I'm Bryar Stewart and I'm the community manager here, which is great. And today's actually my first podcast, so I'm really excited to be interviewing the new CEO, Gavin Lennox. It is great to have you here, Gavin. Thank you very much.
Yep, good to have you here too, Bryar.
Thank you, I appreciate it. How are you going today? How's your day?
Good. Beautiful day outside.
It is beautiful. The weekend was a little bit stormy, so it's nice that today has come around, which is good. But I'm not going to introduce you because I think that may take away a little bit from today's podcast. But what I do know is that you're a champion of New Zealand small businesses, that you have a lot of experience in that growth space, seeing them grow and come into their own, which is really cool. And so we're really excited to be sitting down with you today, knowing that you just started as CEO, Group CEO of the Icehouse in February. And no one knew what this year would be. It's definitely been a pretty crazy year, and I'm sure you can speak to that. But I thought I'd start with some quick fire questions, just to keep things a little bit lighthearted and fun. So first one is, how do you take your coffee? If you are a coffee person.
I'm a coffee drinker. I normally take a flat white, but I have just gone in the last month or so on intermittent fasting, which is this 16/8 thing.
Yep.
Where you don't have food I don't have food in the morning.
Yep.
So I drink black coffee during that period to keep me going.
Nice. I've actually done that. At the start of this year, I got into it. And I can't say I've stuck to it to this day, but it is good. And I also did the black coffee, and it was actually crucial to get me through.
Yeah, I couldn't do it without any sustenance.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, that goes on to our next question. Are you a morning or a night person?
I'm definitely a morning person.
Nice.
I would prefer to get up at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. for something important than I would trying to put an all-nighter. I am definitely more productive in the morning.
Okay, nice. And is the first thing you do coffee? Like, do the two come hand in hand, or can you actually survive without a coffee first thing?
No, I definitely have to have a drink first thing in the morning, and then I'll just sort of flick through a range of sort of news sites. I subscribe to a bunch of stuff like the New York Times, the Guardian, even Fox. I try and get a balance of what's going on there.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. That's good. Okay, favorite meal?
I don't actually have one. What I don't like are fancy meals. So I like simple, well prepared, wholesome food.
Okay.
And increasingly, I'm not a vegan or anything, but increasingly I'm reducing the meat in my diet. But I like anything that I know what it looks like, where it's come from, and it tastes good.
Okay, that's a good answer. It's simple. So no favorite restaurant or anything around?
No, not really. No. I will, as most people attest, I'll eat anything, and with some exceptions, but nothing really stands out actually as my favorite meal.
Okay, that is good to know. That's a great answer. Favorite place in the world?
Well, look, it's got to be New Zealand, hasn't it? I've lived in lots of countries around the world, and every one of them has something great about it, and you just have to seek that out and enjoy and thrive. But I've chosen to come back to New Zealand. I love it here.
Cool, awesome. That's a good answer, and also good that you're here, and there's not any other options that you can be at the moment. So it's good that you're in your favourite spot.
Yeah, very lucky.
I've thrown one in here because I was interested of it. What's your middle name? Do you have a middle name? What is it?
I do have a middle name. It is a family name. It's actually the name of my father's mother's maiden name, and it's difficult to pronounce. It's called McFadgen.
Oh wow!
It is a strange name.
I'm glad I asked that. My middle name's Raquel, and I think people get a bit confused by that one as well, or pronounce it.
Raquel.
Raquel.
That's an unusual name for a woman.
I think it's French.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Nice. It makes a bit more sense when people know that, but yeah, can relate with people going, what? With your middle name, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's got a Z in it. It's got a Z in it, which is always good for Scrabble.
Oh gosh, that's true. Okay, good. I'm glad I asked it. So that was our quick fire round, just to sort of get to know a little bit about you, but random things here and there. But we're now going to get to the good stuff. And that is, what do you do at the Icehouse, Gavin?
Well, look, I am the group CEO, and I've taken over from the inaugural CEO, Andy Hamilton, who had been here, helped build the business up for 20 years.
Awesome.
And I oversee the leadership of primarily what we call our growth business and our ventures business. So both of those are entities, separate entities within the Icehouse. And the growth business is led by Liz Wotherspoon and ventures led by Robbie Paul.
Awesome. Great. Cool. And I know you've been an Ice Angel for many years. Is it about 13, or can you correct me on that one?
When I came back to New Zealand in 2005, I joined the Ice Angels then. So yeah, 15 years.
Awesome. So is that when you first heard about the Icehouse, or when did you first hear about the Icehouse?
When I first came back, I'd been away for about 25 years. And when I first came back, I had to recalibrate and reconnect with the business scene here in New Zealand. I had very few personal contacts after that time. And one of the people I connected with was Andy Hamilton. The other thing I wanted to do was to, in some way, give back to New Zealand. And angel investing is a great way of doing that. It can use some of your business experience and put your own money where your mouth is into more productive assets than say property.
Yeah, great.
So yeah, I joined the Ice Angels back then, and it was a really interesting group. I think there were about 60 or 70 people. Wow. in that first group, and it's grown from there.
Cool. Did you find it hard to connect back in? So once you sort of came back to New Zealand after being quite connected, I'm sure, overseas, was that a struggle in any way, or not too bad?
It was actually. I think New Zealand is kind of known as a country of 2 degrees of separation.
Yes.
But it's also a country that I found as being quite self-referential. So people wanted to know who you knew and what you had done here in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. So until I was able to reestablish myself here, it was almost like all that stuff I'd done overseas didn't really matter that much. So it took a little while. Right. But New Zealanders are incredibly welcoming, and you can just ring someone up, drop them an email, and most people will have a coffee with you and give you some of their time.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, and that's what I'm loving about getting to know the Icehouse community is just the amazing amount of people that we have here and what they do to give back to New Zealand and their own businesses and keep the economy going and just the amazing connections that you can form through being involved in the Icehouse, which is really
and that was something that I found very early on, the Icehouse and the ecosystem within it, which it has helped foster and which it's an integral part of, has been really important.
Yeah, great. Awesome. So you went from hearing about the Icehouse and, becoming an angel investor or an ICE investor. How did you then go from hearing to becoming the CEO? Was that an opportunity presented to you, or is that something you ran after? How did that look for you?
Well, the Icehouse and its board are a very deliberate group of people, and they, Andy had been with the organisation for almost 20 years, and they jointly agreed it was, he chose to leave and pursue other opportunities with his incredible background. So the board actually started the process, I believe, in something like June or July of 2019. Yeah. During that period, I had previously been leading a company called Invenco. Invenco is a payments, hardware and software company based on the North Shore and selling its products globally to a range of fuel retailers mostly.
Awesome.
Companies like Tesco and Asda in the UK, and major fuel retailers that we probably haven't heard of here in New Zealand that are major companies in the US like Speedway
Yeah. Wow.
Interesting fact, Speedway as a company has almost 10 times, more than 10 times the number of fuel stations or gas pumps than the total number in New Zealand. So it just kind of shows you the scale of international markets versus our domestic market.
Yeah.
So during that, I chose to leave Invenco in June of 2019, and I took some time to think about what next. And in parallel, unbeknownst to me, the Icehouse was also looking for a replacement CEO, and I was approached for the job. I can't remember when, may have been August or September, and we got to know each other. I thought I knew what the Icehouse was, but I was way out of date on what the Icehouse was doing.
Yeah.
And so I got to know the Icehouse more, and the board got to know me a little bit better, and it was quite a long process, probably 5 months, I would say, 4 or 5 months.
Wow. Yeah, totally. And was it a decision straight away that you were like, yep, this is me, or did it take you a while to come around to the idea? How did that sort of play out for you?
Look, I think, I don't think it was an instant kind of absolutely decision. And the reason was, I think sometimes you kind of define yourself when you've worked for companies as you always want to kind of think about how you can work on a bigger, larger, and what may seem to be more prestigious type of company to be involved with, maybe sometimes defined by revenues or number of people that you operate with and are responsible for, the scope and scale of the entity. And I looked long and hard at myself and what I felt was important. And in the end of the day, the purpose of the Icehouse aligned really strongly with what I personally wanted to do next.
Yeah.
And that's why I joined.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. And it's a place here where it's such an awesome purpose, supporting our economy and supporting New Zealand businesses, and everyone, in the team is really driving towards that purpose, which is cool and something I've noticed being quite new in my role. It's not really like any other business I've been part of anyway, so it's really cool to see. So,
well, that was the draw card for me. Just helping unleash the extraordinary potential of New Zealand Kiwi business owners and startup founders for the benefit of New Zealand is an inspiring purpose. And you know what? It's a lot easier leading a company with a purpose that means something than one that is purely focused on driving value for shareholders.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So for me, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Awesome. Cool. It's a great answer. Thank you, Gavin. So we've heard the term pivot quite a lot recently, and I guess we've all been through COVID, and it's looked different and meant different, being different for lots of people and what they're going through in their business. But I'd like to know how the team at the Icehouse pivoted during the season of COVID, and obviously it was quite new to you because you had just landed the position of Group CEO in February. Which meant you wouldn't have actually, sort of got your feet under the table for very long at all before things started changing. So from your perspective, how have you seen the team pivot because of what COVID's brought?
Oh, look, it was 4 weeks into me joining the company that COVID hit. Crazy. And in retrospect, I actually think it was a positive thing for me personally in the context of the leadership position that I had inherited here.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think you find out both things about yourself and also about the people that you work with during times of crisis.
Yeah.
And so when I came on board, the Icehouse had a very well thought out operational plan for 2020, and I thought my job was going to be not to screw it up, just come in and help the execution of that as I figured out what to do.
Yeah, of course.
So COVID hit pretty quick, and what it did was, I believe it brought the leadership team and the whole organisation together around the purpose that we had, reaffirming that purpose, and using our resources for what it was intended to do, which is to help small, medium business owners and startup founders to thrive. But obviously in that context, it was more difficult and more challenging.
Yeah.
So we pivoted not only in the context of how and what we prioritized as our customers' requirements, but we also had to change our own business. There were three elements to the business I kind of alluded to before. The one that I had left off was our co-working space.
Yeah.
The physical space that we have here and we share with another sort of 180 other people.
Wow.
Hit very hard by the lockdown. Basically closed the doors for a period of 6 or 8 weeks.
Wow.
The second part was our growth business, which was largely driven through face-to-face online learning programs. They also shut down. The third was our ventures team, who really saw this as almost a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not only for their customers, startup founders, particularly a number of which have thrived during this difficult period, providing essential services, but also in terms of the capital markets. Investors are looking for, as you can see, if you like, the real economy has really been challenged, but the market economy around the stock market and the influx of capital into the stock market, and to a lesser extent, but equally important, into early stage startups, venture capital funds, has equally been matched by during the last few months. So we had a mixed set of challenges. But I'm really proud of the team and how they pulled together and restructured. We restructured our team, our people. We had to unfortunately lay off a few staff, restructure our capital expenditure plan. We raised some capital, and then through the leadership of the team here, but also our board, we said, what would we do if we went bold? What would we do in a difficult period? Awesome. When everyone else is talking about shrinking? What would we do to expand our footprint? And so we raised some capital through the great work of our ventures team. Some of our shareholdings were sold down, and we reinvested in taking our programs online. And we reinvested in another part that we think is critical, and that's why you're here, Bryar, which is in the power of the community. The alumni community that have been through the Icehouse. Over 1,000 owner-managers have been through our owner-manager program, and we've touched over 4,000 companies and helped them grow over the last 20 years. So how do we reinvest that money to continue to do our good work? And that's, we call them a number of transformation projects that we've run, and they cover things from online program delivery, community investment, increasing our coaching capabilities, expanding our regional focus, and lastly, delivering a portal for our investment community so they can see how and track how their investments are progressing.
Awesome. That's great. That's really cool. And yeah, I know I'm thankful that you guys decided to go, bold and be brave, but it really was a brave move, and a move on behalf of lots of New Zealand business owners as well, just saying, hey, we're still here, we're backing you guys, and just seeing the content that came through with COVID support then and now, because it's, businesses are definitely still needing that support. So really cool to see the pivots there. So thanks for that. That's good. And then I was keen to know your opinion on the future landscape of, small and medium-sized businesses in New Zealand, in a post-COVID or COVID world, how that looks, and if you have any thoughts on that.
Look, we've been in a privileged position to have that community of Icehouse alumni. Typically, they're businesses that between $3 and $50 million, looking to owner-operated and looking to grow. As soon as COVID hit, we ran a whole series of online check-ins to see how they were faring, offer them help, see what we can do to bring themselves together so they could help one another.
Yeah, great.
What we found was that about half of them were really thriving, and they were dealing with the challenges of over-demand, and the other half were more challenged, had revenues drop off, and were rapidly thinking about how they would survive.
Yeah.
So we, our view of the future is really instructed by the uncertainty of the COVID virus and how it's progressing globally, and also the uncertainty that people face here in New Zealand as well, as evidenced by the second wave lockdown that we experienced in Auckland recently.
Yeah.
From a long-term planning perspective, it's really hard to figure out what the parameters are, but I think the only certainty is uncertainty. And we're going through a period of, I think, what was called the dance. There was this article written in the early days of COVID called The Hammer and the Dance. And the hammer was the extreme measures to lock down and try and get control of the virus before it spread too widely.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second is the dance, which is this period we're in at the moment, where we're dancing in and out of lockdowns or of containment activities as we work through this. We're lucky in New Zealand that we were able to see from our vantage point what happened in other countries and make decisions accordingly. We're also lucky being an island, or a few islands that make border protection much more easy to manage than other countries. So we're privileged in a way that we're able to operate fairly normally for a while, and we've seen things like real economic activity take a massive decline during the first lockdown, but then recover, and in fact being slightly above previous years. In the recovery weeks, and then took a bit of a hit during the second lockdown. But that's kind of what small businesses are facing. Small businesses represent over a third of the GDP. Over half the employees in New Zealand work for small businesses. So what we've been trying to help and support our small business community with is essentially the primary resource that every company has is people, and helping those leaders of the business navigate this uncertain period. Ultimately, it's the owners and the managers of those businesses that will be making the investment decisions, the market decisions, that are then going to affect the livelihoods of them, their families, and other supply chain companies upon which they depend. So our primary focus is around capability building for those leaders, and it really depends what industry you're in to determine what your future looks like. Some, as I mentioned before, are thriving, and their issues are around finding talent and capital to grow. Others are around retrenchment and pivoting their businesses. One example would be one of our alumni runs a hire car company, and they became a delivery company pretty quickly using their assets. So thinking differently about the assets you have and the new market opportunities is really what many companies are having to face.
Yeah, cool. And just being bold and brave themselves, which is really cool. Is this the first time that you would say you sort of had to lead through a crisis? Like, I know the one I can think of is the global financial crisis that hit, but I'm not sure if you're in a situation there which meant that you had to lead others through it, or there was that feeling of uncertainty of what's next. Is this new for you, or have you? I've heard some business owners saying that the global financial crisis was a bit of a dress rehearsal for COVID, or you know what I mean. It definitely helped them with their response this time round. Can you relate, or is this completely new to you?
Well, I think I've because of the lack of hair I have, people probably realise that I'm not a youngster anymore.
Yeah.
For me, I guess I was just trying to think back to the couple of other crises that I've been through as a leader. In 2000, when I was leading a company called DoubleClick in Europe. They're now owned by Google, and they were the pioneers in online advertising on the internet.
Wow.
So during that period, it was particularly volatile. The dot-com bubble burst, and many of the companies and customers that we served just found that their business models were unsustainable. So I led that tech solutions business through that period. In 2008, with the global financial crisis. I'm just trying to think about where I was at that time. I think, it's here in New Zealand. So
Yeah.
I was involved with a range of startup businesses that were working in the healthcare space, and we again had to face some really difficult challenges. We downsized that business quite dramatically. So yeah, I've been through multiple ones in the past.
Yeah.
But you know what? You learn each time, and I think, but you always have to be reminded about the basics of difficult periods. And I remember listening to a podcast that the Ventures team put together with Derek Handley, and it was called, he entitled the podcast as Winter is Coming. And you needed to plan for the worst, then cut it back, and then think about doubling the time to recovery, and use that as your planning cycle for what the future looked like. And I think those lessons are always worth recalling.
Awesome. Cool. That's great. Thank you, Gavin. And then one that's just a little bit out of the box to finish us up. We're out of time now, but there's been lots of gold during our conversation, which has been cool. But I'm sure the listeners would love to know one interesting fact about you that not many people know. I know I do.
I don't know whether my kids call me the robot at home, so I don't know how interesting they think I am. But I guess a potentially interesting thing is I was born in Singapore.
Oh, cool.
And
Wow.
I was just clocking it up, I've lived in 8 different countries around the world before resettling in New Zealand 15 years ago.
Wow.
So I've loved every minute of living in those different countries. But yeah, Singapore was an interesting one.
Yeah.
At the age of 16, I had to make a decision about whether to become a fully fledged Singaporean citizen or a British citizen.
Wow. So you actually lived there till you were 16? Or?
Yeah, but the decider for me, apart from the fact that the British passport was a good, or remains a great passport, was that I would have had to have returned to Singapore and done military service for 2 years. So yeah, wasn't really up for that.
I actually went to school with someone that had to do that and had to go home and do that, and it was definitely quite the ordeal. So probably
I'm sure it's a formative thing, but at that time in my life, it was not a thing I would have wanted to do. Yeah,
totally. Cool. And once the borders are open, where's the first place you'll be heading to?
It's an interesting one. I reckon my son will be returning to France with his French girlfriend at the end of this year. So probably a trip to Europe and see them. Hopefully we'll have a vaccine by then, and things will calm down a bit.
Totally. Awesome. Great answer. Cool. Well, I definitely feel like I've personally got to know you a bit more, and I'm sure the listeners have too, which is cool. So thank you so much for popping on the podcast and just helping us to get to know you a little bit more and your history and your experience. So I know I'm really enjoying working with the team here and under your leadership, and so I'm excited to continue that. Exciting days ahead of being brave and being bold, that's for sure. And thank you all the listeners for listening in to us, and no doubt we'll be back with some more awesome content and some interesting interviews with some of our other staff as well, which is going to be really interesting. So thank you everyone, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Bryar.
Thanks, Gavin.